I'm Naomi, and it's been a while since this whole fiasco unfolded, but I can't seem to shake it off. Maybe putting it into words and sharing it here will help me get some perspective. Like every other girl, I had always dreamed about my wedding day. Beautiful, flawless, and picture perfect. But the dream shattered the moment my father showed up at the ceremony. You're probably wondering why my father's presence could ruin what should have been the happiest day of my life. To explain, I need to take you back a little, give you some context about my family and the dynamics that brought us to this point. It was just my mom, my dad, and me growing up. We were a small, close-knit family until I turned 16. That's when my parents' marriage fell apart. They divorced, and I moved in with my mom. Within a year, Dad remarried a woman named Carla, who had 2 daughters of her own, Emma and Chloe. The family expanded quickly, but not in the way I had hoped. 2 years later, Mom remarried as well, and I gained a stepdad, Mark. While I was genuinely happy for my parents and their newfound relationships, blending these families wasn't exactly a seamless process. Everyone tried to make it work, but for me, it often felt like I was just a secondary character in other people's stories. Looking back, the cracks started showing when Dad remarried. As an only child, I used to love the idea of a big family. I even thought Emma, Carla's older daughter, and I could become friends since we were close in age. But Emma wasn't interested. She kept her distance, and I eventually stopped trying. I didn't blame her. Adjusting to a new family is hard for everyone. What hurt more was the way Dad's priorities shifted. At first, the changes were subtle, like canceled plans or forgotten promises. Our weekly father-daughter ice cream dates, a tradition since I was 5, became less frequent and then disappeared entirely. When I asked why, Dad would ruffle my hair and say, "Next week, sweetheart, I promise." But next week never came. Then came the bigger disappointments. My first debate competition in high school, Dad promised he'd be there. I scanned the audience, but his seat stayed empty. Later, I found out he had been helping Emma with a science project. This pattern repeated itself over and over. My graduation, my college acceptance. Dad always had something else to do, usually for Emma or Chloe. The final straw came during my sophomore year of college. I had landed an internship with a major news network, a huge opportunity for my journalism career. But the night before I was supposed to fly out, my appendix ruptured. I woke up in the hospital, scared and in pain, with just my mom by my side. Dad wasn't there. Mom said something had come up, but the truth stung even more when I found out later. Dad had stayed back because Emma had broken up with her boyfriend and was upset. That was the beginning of the end for me and Dad. I stopped reaching out. I buried myself in college and internships, building my own life far away from the disappointment. Time passed, and the distance between us grew. Dad's bond with Emma, on the other hand, flourished. He was at every one of her events, cheering her on. When she landed her first job, he threw a party for her. I only found out about it through Facebook. Meanwhile, my life was coming together in other ways. During an internship, I met Ryan, who quickly became my rock. He was sweet, supportive, and everything I needed. We graduated together, started our careers, and when he proposed, I didn't hesitate for a second. For the first time, I felt like I was building a life where I wasn't on the sidelines. Mom was ecstatic. She threw herself into wedding planning with full force, which was exactly what I needed. When I called Dad to tell him the news, his reaction was lukewarm at best. He seemed distracted, and before he could brush me off, I hung up. I wasn't going to let him steal the joy of that moment. We set the wedding date for 5 months later, sent out save the dates, and started planning in earnest. I kept a little secret though. I wanted Dad to walk me down the aisle. Despite everything, I hoped this could be a chance for us to reconnect, to mend what had been broken. But life had other plans. When I finally called Dad to share the news and ask him, he dropped a bombshell. Emma had decided to get married, on the exact same day as my wedding. When Dad told me that Emma was getting married on the same day as me, I thought I must have misheard him. "What do you mean your daughters are getting married?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. But his next words confirmed my worst fears. Apparently, Emma had met the love of her life just a month ago and decided she couldn't wait to tie the knot. And somehow, she'd picked the exact same date as mine. It wasn't just a coincidence. It couldn't be. I had chosen my date 5 months in advance and made sure to send save the dates to everyone, including Dad and his family. Emma knew. She had to know. I was stunned. How could my own father be okay with this? How could Emma, who had ignored me for years, pull something like this? My chest felt tight as I tried to process what he was saying. But you'll still be coming to my wedding, right? You're going to walk me down the aisle? I asked, barely above a whisper. His response was like a slap to the face. Emma's asked me to walk her down the aisle, he said casually, as though it were just another family update. I can't say no to her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just about scheduling conflicts or bad timing anymore. This was a choice. My dad had chosen Emma yet again over me. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. Then before I could stop myself, the words came spilling out. Why does she hate me so much? Why do you always put her first? My voice cracked as I said it, but I didn't care. I had held these feelings inside for years, and they demanded to be heard. Dad sighed, the way you do when you're tired of dealing with someone. You're being dramatic, Naomi. It's just a wedding. You'll understand someday, Dot. That was it. That was the last straw. I'm done, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I can't keep doing this. This back and forth, this disappointment every time. I hope this is the last time we talk. And before he could respond, I hung up. The next month passed in a blur. I threw myself into wedding preparations, trying to ignore the hurt simmering in the background. Mom and my stepdad, Mark, were my saving grace during that time. When Mark found out about what happened with Dad, he immediately offered to walk me down the aisle. I didn't hesitate to accept. Mark and I had never been particularly close, not for lack of effort on his part, but because I spent most of my time at college after he and Mom got married. Still, he was always kind, checking in on me and making sure I knew he cared. The offer meant the world to me. For once, I felt like I had a father figure who saw me. I decided I wouldn't let Dad's decision ruin my wedding. If he and some of the relatives chose to go to Emma's event instead, so be it. I had friends, family, and a partner who loved me, and I was determined to focus on that. The morning of the wedding arrived and everything was going perfectly. Mom and Mark had taken care of every last detail, and I was surrounded by my bridesmaids as we got ready. I felt nervous but excited, the way you're supposed to feel on your wedding day. Then Dad showed up. It was 2 hours before the ceremony, and I was in the middle of getting my makeup done when he appeared out of nowhere, asking to talk. My stomach dropped. The last thing I needed was his drama, but I agreed to hear him out, hoping it wouldn't derail my day. When he walked in, he immediately tried to hug me and showered me with compliments. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he said, but I wasn't in the mood for small talk. "What do you need, Dad?" I asked, cutting to the chase. His face fell, and then he launched into the story. Apparently, at the last minute, Emma had decided she wanted her biological father to walk her down the aisle instead of Dad. She had made it clear that if he didn't leave immediately, he wasn't welcome at her wedding. Part of me felt bad for him. He had bent over backward for Emma for years, only to be tossed aside like an afterthought. But another part of me, one I wasn't proud of, felt a small, bitter sense of satisfaction. For once, he was getting a taste of what it felt like to be sidelined. Still, I didn't want to kick him while he was down. "You're welcome to stay for my wedding," I told him gently. "You'll always have a place here." He smiled, looking relieved, but then he said something that made my blood run cold. I quote him, "So glad I'll still get to walk you down the aisle." I froze. "Dad, no, Mark's walking me down the aisle. We've already planned everything." I tried to keep my voice calm, but the tension was obvious. His expression changed in an instant. "What do you mean Mark's walking you down the aisle? I'm your father," he shouted, his voice echoing in the room. "Why would you let some random guy take my place?" I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay calm. "Dad, please, this isn't the time for this. Let's talk after the ceremony. But he wasn't having it. He started shouting, guilt-tripping me and saying I was erasing him from my life. I tried to reason with him, but he stormed out, yelling for Mark. Before I knew it, the two of them were face to face and Dad lunged at him. Security had to step in to separate them. I was horrified. This was supposed to be my day, the one day in my life where I wasn't overshadowed by someone else's drama. But here I was, watching my father ruin it in front of everyone. Stan, my fiancé, stepped in and told the guards to escort Dad out. He looked at me with so much love and understanding and said, "If you want to call it off, I'll support you." But I shook my head. We had worked too hard for this, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from us. So an hour later, we said our vows. The ceremony was beautiful, and the reception was a blast. But even as I smiled and laughed with my friends and family, a part of me felt hollow. Dad's absence, his actions, cast a shadow over the day I had dreamed of my whole life. In the weeks after the wedding, I tried to focus on the positive. I was married to Ryan, my best friend and the love of my life, and we were starting this incredible new chapter together. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the lingering sadness and resentment. It wasn't just about what happened at the wedding. It was the culmination of years of being sidelined, dismissed, and forgotten by my dad. Ryan encouraged me to talk to Dad to try and get some closure. Part of me wanted to. It felt like the only way to move forward. But another part of me wasn't ready to face the inevitable excuses, the guilt trips, and the lack of accountability. I knew how these conversations went with Dad. They always ended with me feeling like the villain for expressing my feelings. Still, the need for some kind of resolution won out. I reached out to Dad and suggested we meet at a quiet coffee shop. I wanted a neutral place where we could talk without interruptions or distractions. He agreed, but his tone on the phone was lukewarm, almost indifferent. When I walked into the coffee shop, he was already there, scrolling through his phone. He looked up briefly, gave me a half-hearted smile and said, "Can we make this quick? I've got something urgent after this." It was exactly the kind of response I had expected, yet it still hurt. I sat down, took a deep breath, and started talking. I laid everything out. The years of neglect, the constant prioritization of Emma, and how his actions on my wedding day had shattered any hope I had left of rebuilding our relationship. I told him how much it hurt that he didn't even protest when Emma scheduled her wedding on the same day as mine, and how his tantrum at my wedding was just another reminder that I was never his priority. For once, Dad didn't interrupt. He listened quietly, and for a moment I thought he might actually understand how much pain he'd caused. But when I finished, he leaned back, crossed his arms, and sighed heavily. "Naomi, you're being way too harsh," he said. "You have no idea how hard it is to juggle two families. I've done my best, but it's never enough for anyone." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Your best?" I said, my voice trembling. "You missed my graduation. You weren't there when I got accepted into college. You didn't show up when I was in the hospital. And on my wedding day, you chose to prioritize Emma, just like you always do. How is that your best?" He shook his head, his face etched with frustration. "You don't understand what it's like, Naomi. Emma and Chloe needed me, and I had to be there for them. It's not like I didn't care about you. I just had to make tough choices." "Tough choices?" I snapped. "You didn't have to choose between us, Dad. You chose to prioritize them over and over again. You didn't even try to balance it, Dot." He looked away, clearly annoyed. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Your wedding wasn't the only important thing happening that day. And honestly, you should have been more understanding about Emma's situation, Dot. That was it. That was the moment I realized he wasn't going to change. He didn't see anything wrong with his actions because in his mind he was always the victim, always the one making sacrifices. He couldn't or wouldn't see how his choices had hurt me. I quote, "Am done, Dad," I said, standing up. "I've spent my whole life trying to get you to see me and to care about me the way you care about them. But I'm done chasing something that's never going to happen, Dot." He didn't try to stop me as I walked out of the coffee shop. Part of me had hoped he would, that he'd realize how much he was losing and fight to make things right. But he just sat there, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. That night, I told Ryan about the conversation. He held me as I cried, assuring me that I had done everything I could. "You can't keep setting yourself on fire to keep him warm," he said gently. "It's time to focus on the people who actually care about you, Dot." He was right. For the first time in years, I started to think about what I needed, instead of trying to fit into a relationship that had only ever made me feel small. But just when I thought I could start moving on, another bombshell dropped. A few weeks after that painful conversation with Dad, I had lunch with my cousin Rachel. She had attended Emma's wedding, and though I was hesitant to talk about it, curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to know how things had gone on her side of the family that day. What Rachel told me, though, left me completely floored. Apparently, Emma had been very open about why she scheduled her wedding on the same day as mine. It wasn't a coincidence or an oversight. It was deliberate, a power move. Rachel said Emma had bragged about it to her guests, claiming that she wanted to make sure everyone remembered her big day. She even laughed about how it would overshadow mine. I felt the air leave my lungs. I had suspected there was more to it, but hearing it confirmed hit me like a truck. And that wasn't even the worst part. Rachel continued, her voice hesitant as though she wasn't sure how much to tell me. "Naomi, she also said some pretty harsh things about you," she admitted. "She told people you were jealous of her and that you'd always had issues with her and Dad. She even said you used to argue with her mom about her." I was stunned. "But that's not true," I said, shaking my head. "I never argued with Carla about Emma. I've always kept my feelings to myself." "I know," Rachel said quickly, "but Emma made it sound like you were this bitter, jealous stepsister who couldn't stand her." And well, some people believed her. I sat there trying to process what I was hearing. It was one thing for Emma to schedule her wedding on my date. It was petty and hurtful, but I could have moved past it. But to paint me as some kind of villain in front of our family? To twist the narrative and make herself the victim? That was a new level of cruelty. Then Rachel dropped the final bombshell. "She also talked about your dad," she said, lowering her voice. "She told people that he never really loved her and only took care of her because he wanted to keep Carla happy. She even said he was more focused on you and your mom than he ever was on her." I felt a mix of anger and confusion. Emma had always been Dad's priority. He had missed countless milestones in my life to be there for her, and now she was spreading lies about him too? The irony was almost laughable, but it also made me feel sick. I asked Rachel why Carla hadn't said anything to defend Dad. After all, she knew the truth. Rachel shrugged. "I think she just wanted to avoid making a scene," she said. "But honestly, it felt like everyone at that wedding was playing along with Emma's version of events." I didn't know what to do with this information. On one hand, it explained so much. Why Emma had been so dismissive of me, why Dad had been so willing to accommodate her wedding date, and why she'd thrown him under the bus when she didn't need him anymore. But on the other hand, it left me with even more questions. Did Dad know about the things Emma had said? Did he believe them? I couldn't bring myself to confront him about it. Part of me was scared that he'd defend Emma, that he'd justify her actions the way he always had. Instead, I decided to take a step back. I declined invitations to family gatherings, claiming work commitments, and started seeing a therapist to help me untangle my feelings. It was clear that I needed to focus on my own well-being, even if it meant putting some distance between me and the people who had hurt me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much of my life I had spent bending over backward to please people who didn't value me. For years, I had let Dad's actions chip away at my self-worth. I had made excuses for Emma's behavior, convincing myself that it was just a misunderstanding or a personality clash. But this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate, and I couldn't keep letting it consume me. Ryan was my rock through all of this. He listened without judgment as I vented, held me when I cried, and reminded me that I wasn't alone. "You don't have to carry this weight by yourself," he told me one night. "You've got me, Naomi. You've always got me, Dot." It was a simple statement, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. For so long, I had felt like I was fighting these battles alone. But with Ryan, I finally felt like I had a partner who would stand by me, no matter what. Still, there was one question that kept gnawing at me. Did my other relatives see me as the villain Emma had painted me to be? Were they judging me based on her lies? The thought of confronting them felt exhausting, but I couldn't stop wondering if they even knew the truth. After weeks of reflection, therapy sessions, and long talks with Ryan, I realized I couldn't keep carrying the weight of Emma's lies and Dad's neglect. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about a lifetime of feeling like I didn't matter. For the first time in my life, I was ready to stand up for myself. I decided to meet with Dad one last time. I knew it was risky, but I needed to say my piece. Ryan encouraged me, reminding me that I wasn't going into this conversation to change Dad's mind or fix anything. I was going to set boundaries for myself. When I arrived at Dad's house, he greeted me with a forced smile. He didn't look thrilled to see me, but he didn't seem angry either. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I quote, "Not here to argue," I began. "I just need you to listen." He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "All right," he said, though his tone suggested he was already bracing himself for a fight. I started from the beginning. I talked about how his absence during my milestones had hurt me, how I had always felt like I came second to Emma and Chloe, and how his actions at my wedding had been the final straw. I didn't hold back. I told him how betrayed I felt when he didn't stand up for me, how humiliating it was to watch him storm out of my wedding, and how devastating it was to learn that Emma's decision to share my wedding date wasn't just careless. It was deliberate. I quote, "V spent my whole life trying to make you see me," I said, my voice trembling. "But I'm done chasing after your approval. If you want a relationship with me, you have to meet me halfway. And if you can't do that, I'm okay walking away." For a moment, he just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then he shook his head, letting out a bitter laugh. "You're being unfair," he said. "You don't understand how hard it's been for me trying to juggle two families. I did the best I could, Naomi. If that's not enough for you, then maybe the problem isn't me." It was exactly the response I had been expecting, but it still stung. "You always do this," I said quietly. "You make yourself the victim so you don't have to take responsibility. I'm tired of it." His face hardened. "If that's how you feel, maybe you should just walk away. Maybe that's what you've wanted all along." I stood up, my hands shaking. "I didn't want this," I said. "I wanted a father who cared about me and who showed up for me. But I can't keep holding on to something that doesn't exist." As I walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. I had finally said everything I needed to say, but I knew this conversation marked the end of any hope I had for a meaningful relationship with my dad. I drove home in silence, my mind racing with thoughts. When I walked through the door, Ryan was waiting for me. He pulled me into a hug, and I let myself cry. Tears of grief for the relationship I had lost, but also tears of relief for finally choosing myself. As for Emma, I decided to go no contact. Her behavior at the wedding and the lies she spread afterward made it clear that she didn't see me as family. I didn't confront her about what Rachel had told me. It wasn't worth the emotional energy. Instead, I told Dad that I wouldn't attend any family events where she was present. He didn't argue, though I could tell he wasn't happy about it. In the weeks that followed, I started rebuilding my life. I reached out to old friends, joined a book club, and threw myself into work. Therapy helped me process the pain and learn how to set healthy boundaries. Slowly but surely, I began to feel lighter, freer. Ryan and I also took a short getaway, a trip we had planned before the wedding but postponed because of all the chaos. It was exactly what we needed. We spent our days exploring new places and our nights talking about the future. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful. As for my extended family, I decided to let go of the need to prove myself to them. If they believed Emma's lies, that was on them, not me. I couldn't control their opinions, but I could control how much access I gave them to my life. Looking back, this whole experience taught me some hard but necessary lessons. It forced me to confront the painful truth about my relationships and prioritize my own well-being. It wasn't easy, it still isn't, but I know I'm on the right path. To anyone reading this who's struggling with similar family dynamics, you don't have to keep people in your life just because they're family. You deserve relationships that lift you up, not tear you down. It's okay to choose yourself. Story 2. When my mom sold my flat to pay for my brother's college after forging my signature, am I the jerk for cutting her off? I'm Sarah, and to be honest, my relationship with my 52-year-old mother, Brenda, has never been easy. My parents' divorce when I was about 8 years old caused everything to fall apart. Even though we never really clicked. Bill, my father, would have been 58. M was a decent man, but he had had enough. She simply wore him down by constantly berating him about money and how he wasn't doing enough. He finally had enough and walked out. Mom didn't spend any time playing the victim when I moved home with her after the divorce. It wasn't like that at all, despite what she told everyone about Dad leaving us. He continued to be involved, visit when he could, and pay child support. However, Mom would view the child support checks, scoff, and remark things like, "This is all your father thinks you're worth." Even though I now see that my father was doing everything he could, it troubled me as a child and gave me the impression that he wasn't doing enough. When Mom met Tom, who is now 53, things became even worse. M, an independent contractor who appeared to be doing well for himself. After they had Jake, my half-brother, I felt as though I had vanished. Most of the time, I was left to fend for myself, while Mom prepared these elaborate meals for Tom and Jake. There might occasionally be no food in the refrigerator when I got home. In my own house, I felt like a ghost. The big bomb went off, though, when I discovered that Mom was having an affair with Tom. And it wasn't a little incident or a suspicion. I happened upon it. It was a full-fledged, confrontational type of revelation. I was just a few months away from graduating high school at the age of 17, when it all began. I have a clear memory of the day. I had gone out with several buddies on a Saturday. I got home a little early than normal since we finished up sooner than I had anticipated. I just thought it would be a calm afternoon, but as soon as I went through the door, I sensed something was off. When the home is too quiet, like abnormally silent, you know. It was just like that. I yelled, "Mom, Tom," but nobody answered. I heard it at that point. Upstairs, voices. I initially believed that Mom may be only conversing on the phone or anything. Then I heard someone laughing. The type of laugh she used to have with Tom when they were acting all sexy and obscene. Not just any laugh. However, it didn't sound like Tom was the source of her laughter this time. Even though my heart was racing, I was unable to stop it. Making as little noise as possible, I began to crawl up the steps. As I approached her bedroom door, the sounds became more distinct. Then I heard it. It was a man's voice again. It wasn't Tom's either. I paused directly in front of her door. It was just open enough for me to view it without drawing attention to myself. I spotted them as I peered through the opening. My mother and a stranger. As if they didn't give a damn, they were sprawled out on the bed, enveloped in the covers. I went cold. At first, I was unable to really comprehend what I was witnessing. What I was seeing was simply too much for my brain to process. What's the worst? They were giggling, they were laughing as if their actions were nothing. As if it were a casual Saturday afternoon event. They both looked up at the same moment, so I must have made a noise. My mother's face became white. She hurried to cover the man and herself with the blanket. He only grinned. He made no effort to conceal what was taking place. He gave me a look as if I were the one who wasn't supposed to be there and that I was ruining his day. "Hold on, Sarah," Mom stumbled. "This isn't what it looks like." However, it was just what it appeared to be. They caught her, and she couldn't get out of it by talking her way out of it. I said nothing at all. I was unable to. I simply turned and took off running. Without turning around, I ran out of the home and down the stairs. My thoughts were racing. All I could think about as my hands began to shake was, what the hell did I just see? I spent what seemed like hours strolling about the area in an attempt to understand it. I had no idea what to do. A part of me wanted to go back and urge Tom to blow it all up and yell at her. On the other hand, I simply felt numb, as if I couldn't bear the consequences. So I didn't immediately return home. I spent the night at a friend's house and kept it a secret from everyone. I was unable to. It was too hefty to utter aloud. I returned the next morning. I had to do it, not because I wanted to. I was still required to reside there. There was still a way to live in that house, being aware of what I know. It seemed as if nothing had happened when I returned. In the kitchen, Mom pretended that it was an ordinary day. As if I hadn't just discovered her infidelity the day before. I didn't give her any recognition. After locking the door and heading directly to my room, I just sat there and gazed at the wall. I no longer had the same way of looking at her. A switch seems to have flipped. It all felt different. It felt as if I had lost all remaining respect for her. The relationship between her and I was essentially over after that. I didn't talk to her much. I was private. I spent much of my time in my room and only out when absolutely necessary. I was unable to confront her once again. I knew one thing, but I wasn't prepared for the struggle. I was eagerly awaiting the day when I could finally leave that house. I kept my head down for a few weeks, doing the routine and avoiding her at all costs. However, I couldn't get rid of that instinct. The one who told me I had to go. The issue was that I had no idea where to go. Then I recalled something my father had said some time ago, a flat. When I was preparing to move out after high school, Dad had mentioned in passing that he had hoped to arrange something for me. I didn't give it much thought at the time, but now I do. It seemed like a lifeline now. I chose to give him a call. I had been gathering courage all day, and it was a Friday after school. As I phoned his number, my heart was pounding. His voice was as steady as usual when he picked up, as if he was unaware of what was happening. Hello, child. What is going on? I paused for a while, uncertain of where to begin. Dad, hello, I need to discuss something essential with you. A pause occurred. Naturally, what's happening? I inhaled deeply. I'd like to live with you. Mom is no longer able to accommodate me. There was a pause, and I prepared myself for his answer. When he did speak, though, it was just what I needed to hear. You can, of course, Sarah. All right, we'll work it out. Do not be concerned. I felt an unbelievable sense of relaxation. I was afraid he wouldn't want to get involved and would say no. But my dad wasn't like that. He didn't complicate things or ask a lot of questions. He just said yes, as if that were the world's most natural thing. He went on, I'll come get you tomorrow. Gather the necessities. I packed as much as I could into a few of suitcases that evening. Leaving the majority of my belongings behind didn't even concern me. All I wanted to do was go. I heard nothing from Mom. She pretended not to see me packing. Perhaps she didn't. A portion of her, I believe, simply didn't care. I was no longer a part of her universe. She had Jake and Tom. The following day, Dad arrived on schedule. While I loaded my stuff into the car, I liked that he didn't ask for specifics. We didn't chat much on the way to his apartment. He simply drove. I felt like I could breathe again once we arrived. Dad knocked on the door later that night after I had moved into my new room. Calm as always, he entered and sat on the side of the bed. I've been thinking, he added, but I know things have been tough. Do you recall the flat I described earlier? Curious to see where this was headed, I nodded. I had intended to present it to you after you graduated, but I believe this is a wonderful moment to do so. You are worthy of having your own, particularly in light of all that has been going on with your mother. I was taken aback. Hold on, I'm getting an apartment from you? Yeah, he answered, grinning slightly. It's yours, but it's not really fancy. Now that you're 17, I want you to have it. One thing, only one thing. Since your mother is still legally in charge of you, her name must appear on the documents for the time being. However, we'll transfer it to you in full when you reach 18. It seemed unbelievable to me. My entire life seemed to be improving all of a sudden, even though I hadn't even thought of this as a possibility. It felt like a dream come true to think about having a home of my own away from the commotion. The next weekend, we went to see it. It was ideal for me, however it wasn't too big. It was only a tiny one-bedroom apartment, far enough from my mother to allow me to breathe, yet close enough to my school to allow me to complete the year. While strolling around the flat, I had the unshakable impression that something fresh was about to happen, a better one. Naturally, there was the entire problem of the papers having Mom's name on it. We had no other option because legally, she still had custody. Dad told me, however, that it was just temporary, that it would be all mine once I became 18. I had faith in him. I had never been disappointed by him before. Things proceeded really swiftly once we signed the paperwork. I divided my time between setting up and preparing the new apartment and Dad's house. I felt as though I was at last taking charge of my own life. And it was wonderful. Mom didn't give a damn. She was probably simply pleased that I wasn't there to remind her of what I had saw her doing. She never sought to become engaged or question me about the flat. To be honest, I didn't mind at all that I seemed to have vanished from her life. I wanted to avoid her as much as possible. It had been refreshing to live with Dad. Unlike his mother, he wasn't domineering or dominating. He was there for me whenever I needed him, but he also gave me space. Together, we would watch TV, have supper, and simply discuss life. It seemed typical. It was something I hadn't felt in a while. Dad brought up the flat once more during one of those dinners. You've done a great job balancing everything, he added to Sarah. It's a good alternative if you ever want to rent out the flat once you start college. Having that type of supplementary money is beneficial. It was as if my mind suddenly became clear. The apartment was excellent, but it wasn't really feasible for me to continue living there once I relocated for school to the opposite side of town. Considering how expensive college was, renting it out may help me pay for my expenditures. Though I felt it was a good concept in the back of my mind, I assured Dad I would give it some thought. For the moment, everything looked to be coming together, even though I had no idea that the apartment would later become the focal point of a very other storm. My father supported my independence and a destiny that seemed entirely up to me. When my father died a few years later, everything fell apart once more. The feeling of losing someone like that is difficult to describe. My father has been my support throughout my life, the only one I could rely on. I was therefore very affected when he became ill. Cancer is a vicious disease. He moved more quickly than I had anticipated. There was a day when he was fine. The next day, I was seeing his increasing weakness. In order to care for him, I resigned my career. There was no doubt at all. For him, I would do everything. I was utterly destroyed by the time he died. After everything I had done to care for him, he was gone. The flat was now totally in my name and belonged to me. And the fact that I had a place to stay should have given me some relief. Instead, I simply felt disoriented. It was at that point that my mother began to reappear. Remember, after I moved out, we hadn't talked much. She never exhibited any interest in my life, even though she knew I had a house of my own. After I left her house, she never even inquired about my well-being. I wasn't sure what to think when she abruptly contacted me following the loss of my father. There was a part of me that hoped Mom had changed, that perhaps losing Dad had made her realize that life was too short to waste on all the garbage she had done to me. I suppose I felt susceptible because I was mourning and wanted to think she was attempting to support me. It appeared to be okay at first. She gave me a couple calls to see how I was doing and to check in. I didn't push her away, but I also wasn't exactly friendly. Even if it was her, it was good to have someone inquire about me for once because I felt lonely. The discussions were somewhat superficial. Neither she nor I ever mentioned anything from the past. To be honest, I didn't believe she would ever be prepared to accept responsibility for her role in things, and I wasn't prepared to get into all of that. But shortly after it began modest, things began to change. She casually brought up Jake's preparations for college and the high cost of tuition during one of her phone conversations. At the time, I didn't give it much thought. I simply nodded and said things like, "Yeah, college can be costly," believing that to be the end of it. However, following that, money appeared to be the topic of every discussion. She gave subtle clues about how difficult life was for her and Tom, about how the economy was making things more difficult. Since I wasn't seeking for it, I wasn't really noticing it at first. Then she asked me directly for assistance. "Could you please provide us a loan so we can pay for Jake's college tuition?" "One day," she said on the phone. For a while I sat there in shock, trying to take in what I had just heard. My mind was still in the pondering phase. It felt like she was only using me as an ATM, albeit perhaps this was her attempt to mend our relationship. Hold on. "What?" "Not sure if I heard her correctly," I said. "You must have some extra cash coming in because you have the flat and are currently renting it out." She drifted off as if I was meant to jump in and volunteer, even though Tom and I are trying our hardest to help Jake get all of his scholarships set up. I didn't. I felt as like the rug had been yanked out from under me, and I simply sat there in quiet for a while. As a bereaved father, I was still attempting to understand what my life would be like without him. In addition, my mother, with whom I hadn't had a meaningful contact for years, was requesting money from me. "I am unable to assist you with that." When I did say it, I tried to speak steadily. "I'm only now beginning to recover from all that happened with Dad." The uneasy quiet on the line seemed to indicate that she didn't think I would say no. When she spoke again, I could sense the change in tone. She answered in a strained voice, "I understand. With everything going on, I just figured you would want to assist your brother. After that call, I didn't fall for the ruse. Things became strange between us." She reduced the frequency of her calls, and when she did, they were brief, and to the point where I could sense her retreating. To be honest, I didn't mind at all. I couldn't handle her guilt trips because I was too exhausted from everything else. However, I was surprised when she went above and above. I received a note from my renter at the unit a few weeks after that phone chat. They were yelling that they had been served with an eviction notice. I phoned them back to find out what was going on since I was really perplexed and hadn't given any notice to leave or even considered selling the property. My flat had been sold, and not only sold, it turned out, I was not even aware that it had been sold. Initially, I assumed that this must be some kind of fraud or error. This couldn't be real, could it? I called my lawyer right away, and we got to work reviewing the documents. The bomb dropped at that moment. My mother had falsified my signature to sell the flat, and her name was still on the documents from when I was a minor. I was blown away, totally caught off guard. What I was hearing was unbelievable. Who, after all, does that? Who doesn't notify their children when they sell their apartment? When I phoned her, I was trembling. How on earth did you accomplish that? When she took up the phone, I yelled, "Have you actually sold my flat?" She didn't even appear to be affected. It didn't seem like a huge problem to me. Her voice was gratingly composed as she spoke. "Since Jake needed the money for school, you weren't utilizing it. It only sat there." I couldn't speak. This was no little miscommunication. I lived in this flat, the place Dad gave me, the location that should have been mine. She just sold it as if it were hers to do with what she pleased. Despite my best efforts, I was unable to keep it together. It quote, "S unbelievable that you accomplished this." My voice trembled with rage as I spoke. "You were not entitled. In actuality, my name was still on the documents." "That made it okay," she remarked. "In addition, it will benefit a worthy cause. That money is necessary for your brother." For me, it was it. It seemed unbelievable to me that my own mother had sold something that wasn't even hers to sell, falsified my signature, and went behind my back. For what purpose? To assist Jake. I didn't dislike him. It wasn't about him, though. This concerned her going too far, something I didn't even believe was feasible. It wasn't hers that she sold. My dad gave me something and then it didn't matter. I had to address her face to face because I knew I had to do something about it. That same day I took a car to her residence. The entire time my mind was racing. I knew I had to say something, but I wasn't sure what I would say. I wasted no time in getting there. I approached the door directly and hardly knocked before entering. She pretended everything was all right as she hummed to herself in the kitchen. Mine, on the other hand, was upside down. As like she hadn't just pulled the rug out from under me, she glanced up and grinned. "Oh, Sarah, hello. Why do you come by?" She was so nonchalant that I was shocked, behaving as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't secretly sold my flat. My pulse was racing, and I was so furious that I was having trouble speaking clearly. "Do you genuinely believe that what you did was acceptable? I lost it and sold my flat without informing anyone." She didn't appear as guilty as I had assumed, but her grin dimmed. "Sarah, I informed you that Jake needed school aid, but you weren't utilizing it." She shrugged as if it didn't matter. All it did was sit there, empty. What I was hearing was unbelievable. As if it didn't matter, she was acting as though she was selling the flat for a little issue. "Mom, you didn't sell it. I owned that flat. My signature was falsified by you." By now I was virtually screaming. She leaned on the counter with her arms folded. For someone who had just committed fraud, he was still far too composed. "In a technical sense, the document still bore my name. I am also your mother. I acted in the family's best interests." What was best for the family was that sentence. I wanted to shout because of it. She wasn't helping the family in any way. This was what she was doing for herself. Jake is being used as an excuse. It was unbelievable to me that she was dismissing it as insignificant. "You don't know what you did." My voice shook with rage as I spoke. "No one's best interests were at stake here. It was your belief that you could steal something that wasn't rightfully yours." She rolled her eyes as if I were exaggerating. "You're going overboard, Sarah. It's just money. It was necessary for school for your sibling. You no longer need that place, and you have your own life today. By now, my hands were trembling. I inhaled deeply, making an effort to keep things together. "Mom, you made up my name. Do you even realize that's against the law? Do you really believe that you can simply take anything from me and use it as your own piggy bank?" she sighed, obviously fed up with the discussion. Sarah, I'm your mom. I was surprised to see how unappreciative you were about this. I tried to assist your sibling. You'll be all right? You're never thankful. She dared to accuse me of being unappreciative. What I was hearing was unbelievable. This went beyond her typical self-centeredness. This was illegal. She was also behaving as though I was the issue. I said, I've already called my attorney. And her expression shifted at once. Gone is that cool, arrogant attitude. She stood up straight, and for the first time I noticed that she was genuinely anxious. Your lawyer, what do you mean? Despite her best efforts to be informal, I could detect the sharpness in her voice as she inquired. In other words, I'm going to sue you, I said in a chilly tone. You were dishonest. Mom, this isn't a simple miscommunication. You will be held accountable for selling anything that wasn't yours. Her face lost its color, and she remained silent for a moment. I believe she at last recognized how deeply ingrained she was. Sarah. With a somewhat more urgent tone, she replied, You don't have to do this. Right now, we are related. We can resolve this. I felt all the rage rising up again as I shook my head. No, we are unable to. As soon as you faked my name, you made sure of it. Did you not give it a second thought? You showed no concern for my needs or desires. It was all about you, and I've had enough of you stepping all over me. She seemed to be trying to find out how to speak her way out of this. Since she remained silent for a while, I had no intention of it getting this far. At last, she stated that I was only attempting to assist Jake. I also believed that you believed you could achieve anything you desired. I cut you off. You were indifferent to the repercussions. You never do. However, you won't get away with it this time. She yelled after me, but I turned and started to leave the kitchen. Hold on, Sarah. Don't do this, please. We are related. Do you wish to avoid going to court about this? At the door, I paused and gave her one more look. You gave me no other option, even though I didn't want any of this. I left without turning around. My entire world seemed to be collapsing. However, I also experienced an odd feeling of clarity. I was aware of my obligations. This was not something I was going to let her get away with. This time she had pushed me too far, and there was no turning back. The days that followed were a haze of emails, phone conversations with my attorney, and document collection. I had a strong case, according to my attorney. All of her actions, every falsified paper, and every dubious element was being exposed. I had to keep moving forward even if it was exhausting. I was battling for more than just my residence. I was defending myself and all she had stolen from me, both materially and emotionally. I didn't have a choice, but I wasn't prepared for the next court struggle. After months of back-and-forth court filings and unending anxiety, justice was finally served. I won the case in court. It is true that my mother falsified my signature in order to sell my apartment, and her actions were not only against the law, but also blatantly dishonorable. After all the bustle, I was both relieved and exhausted when I received the news. At last, it was over. The decision was unambiguous. Mom was convicted of fraud and forgery. She had sold something that wasn't hers, went behind my back, and acted as though it didn't exist. Money wasn't the only factor. It had to do with trust, or what remained of it. It didn't matter now, though. I didn't want to lose everything my father had given me, and she was going to prison. When I was informed of the judge's ruling, I wasn't immediately struck by it. It seemed unreal, as like this couldn't possibly be true. I didn't even want things to get to this point. After all, who wants to imprison their own mother? However, I was also aware that this was the result of her behavior. I couldn't ignore the line she crossed, and it was no longer just about me. It was about defending the moral high ground. Mom made an effort to seem tough throughout the trial, as if she still had the advantage, but toward the end, her eyes were filled with terror. She was coming to terms with the fact that she had lost. I didn't feel pleased or victorious when they gave her her punishment. I felt devoid. I didn't think our relationship could ever get back on track because she was going to jail for fraud. I didn't want it to. She had to deal with the repercussions of her decision. She was worried about more than just the flat, though. There was another matter to attend to. Tom. You see, Tom was completely unaware of what had been happening during all of this. He was unaware of the apartment transaction, the deception, or the falsified documentation. More significantly, though, he was unaware of the affair. I had been keeping that secret for far too long, and I finally caught my mother all those years ago. And I knew I couldn't contain it any longer. After everything that had transpired, Tom needed to know the truth now. I had no idea how to go about it. How, after all, can you inform someone that their spouse has cheated on them? That for years she had been deceiving them? After much deliberation, I concluded that ripping off the Band-Aid was the wisest course of action. No matter how painful it was, he had a right to know the truth. So I went to see Tom. I simply came out with it after some awkward small conversation after we had sat down. I have something to tell you, Tom. It will also be difficult to hear. He gave me a perplexed look, but he could see I was serious. What is it? He inquired. I inhaled deeply. I found my mother cheating on you when I was 17 years old a few years ago. At the time, I kept it to myself since I wasn't sure how to tell you. However, I can no longer contain it after everything that has transpired. You must be aware. His face became white. The shock struck him like a brick as I could see. She betrayed me. He stumbled as if he was having trouble understanding what he was saying. When I described everything, on the day I arrived home early, I noticed her with an unknown man. She dismissed it with a joke, and I had been silent for years because I was unsure of how to handle it. I told him how deeply it had affected me, but I also told him that I had come to the realization that I could no longer let her falsehoods to rule my life in the wake of the fraud and the court case. For a while, Tom just sat there and gazed at the table. His hands curled into fists, and I could see the rage rising in his eyes. I didn't know. At last, he muttered, I didn't know she could do all of this. I remained silent. What could I say? I couldn't really make his life any easier. She defrauds you of the flat first, and now I find out. I've been deceived by her for years. Almost to himself, he whispered. I could feel the agony in his eyes when he glanced up at me. I appreciate you informing me. Thank you, but I wish I'd known sooner. Following that discussion, things proceeded swiftly. Tom submitted a divorce petition. He was unable to remain with her. Not with all that had been revealed. The affair comes after the scam and the forgery. Their marriage was obviously finished. In all honesty, I believe he was eager to end his relationship with her. As she had done with me, she had done the same to him. And at last, he recognized her true self. She ultimately lost everything. Her marriage had ended. She was incarcerated and no longer had a relationship with me. I wish I could claim that it gave me a sense of fulfillment, but I didn't. It was merely depressing, everything. I utilized the money I received from the apartment sale to purchase my own home, a location that was all mine, no conditions. It seemed like a new beginning. After all the turmoil, I really needed this. My mother was convicted, and I haven't talked to her since. I don't intend to be honest. What she accomplished cannot be undone. Some things are simply too damaged to be fixed. Although we're not very close, Tom and I have occasionally stayed in touch. I believe he is only attempting to reconstruct his life. I can't blame him either. Finding out someone you trusted has been lying to you all along is difficult. Jake is doing okay too. We occasionally speak now that he's a college student. He had no idea what his mother had done, nor do I hold him responsible for any of it. He's probably as astonished by it all as I am. Additionally, he is attempting to determine how to proceed. We are trying to establish a connection, but it's difficult because of all that has transpired. That's all then. That's the current situation. After a lengthy journey, I finally reached a point where I feel like I can breathe normally again. Mom is incarcerated. I'm going on with my life now that Tom is free of her. I got it, even if that's not the finale I had in mind. Story 3. I paid for the vacation, and my sister-in-law forbade me from being included in the family portrait. I decided it would be a good idea to send my wife Sarah, her parents, and her younger sister Amy on a family holiday to Cabo San Lucas after I left her with unpaid debts. After 10 years of marriage, Sarah and I have prospered as a couple. We love to travel, have nice professions, and have no children. Every year, simply the two of us generally organize a couple pleasant trips. However, we have just begun to invite her parents to one of them. Due to his poor health, her dad had been expressing a desire to return to Cabo. It seems that they went on their honeymoon there around 40 years ago. In any case, I didn't mind paying for the vacation even though he volunteered to help out. I reasoned that because Sarah and I would already be paying for ourselves, it wouldn't harm to add 2 more. And I've always had good treatment from her folks. It's my way of giving back in a sense. Do you know? The journey appeared to be going perfectly. Then Amy arrived. Amy is in the early 30s. Being a single mother of 3 children, she most certainly lacks the funds necessary for such a trip. She would always give us this sad expression after we returned from one, as if she couldn't do something similar. Amy then came out and asked if she could go this time when Sarah brought it up to her. After giving it some thought, I responded, "Okay." I thought it would be good to help her as well, and perhaps it would help her feel involved. Arranged for her flight, booked the rooms, took care of everything. I was already paying for 4 of them. What is 1 more then? Correct. When we arrive, things begin to take a turn for the worst. We get to this beach resort on the first day, a lovely location, directly on the water. I had the notion to snap a family portrait as we're all getting settled. I kinda like it. To remember the beginning of any journey. Always take a picture of your arrival. Thus, I'm gathering everyone. Amy says, "Oh, could you take the picture for us while I'm preparing the shoot? All we want is a 4-person one." I thought, wait, what? At first, I thought I might have misheard, but she was being quite serious. She desired to be alone with Sarah, her parents, and herself. I thought she would want a couple pictures of them alone. The original family stuff, you know. However, I didn't want to cause a scene or anything, so I simply took the photo and brushed it off when you asked me that straight away and in that tone. Assumed that would be an isolated incident. Yes. As it happens, I was mistaken. Amy seemed to make sure I was on the opposite side of the camera whenever she had the chance. She would say, "Oh, let's get a family picture," when we were doing something interesting or enjoying a view of the beach. And guess who held the camera each and every time? Mr. It wasn't subtle at all. She would say things like, "This is just for family," or "just us 4 for this one. This should presumably include me," if I'm not incorrect. Sarah and I have been wed for 10 years, but Sarah would make an effort to involve me. "Why don't we all take one together?" she would say. Additionally, her parents would interject and attempt to include me in the picture. However, Amy persisted. No, let's just do one without him first," she would say, and they would be prepared to proceed after completing the first picture. Or she would find a way to completely ignore me. I wasn't there only to take pictures. However, you become aware when you are absent from every recollection. Amy was also sharing content on social media. She was posting pictures that appeared to show her visiting Cabo with her family each time I checked. In the backdrop, I was simply a person holding the camera. You would definitely assume I wasn't even there if you scrolled through her photos. Being the invisible person on your own vacation, especially one you paid for, is a strange experience. I didn't want to come across as petty, but it began to bother me after the 10th time. After that, we went to supper. We proceeded to a quite lovely restaurant that I had reserved in advance, one of those spots where you can see the sunset. Finally, I decided that today would be a time to unwind. We're sitting down and I'm thinking that Sarah and I will sit across from her parents. However, not at all. Sarah and Amy fit neatly in beside one another, leaving me with a service station on one side and her parents on the other. Not even the view was visible to me. Amy continued to stare at old family stories as I attempted to participate in the conversation. Things that were not about me. She would talk endlessly about her early travels, things from before Sarah and I were ever acquainted. Sarah and her parents would make an effort to explain things to me and include me. It felt forced, though. By the conclusion of supper, Amy would constantly shifting the subject as if I were an outsider. As they all chuckled over stories, I was essentially sitting there in quiet. I had never participated in it. It seemed as though I was only accompanying someone else on a family vacation. And it was only the first day. Okay, so I was hopeful that things would improve after the whole incident at dinner on the first day. I assumed things would calm down and that Amy was simply happy to be with her family. But it didn't. To be honest, things got worse. She seems to be doing all in her power to ignore me. It was something she did. In order to unwind and enjoy the day together, Sarah and I reserved a private beach cabana for everyone at this amazing resort in Cabo, where we have a ton of activities planned. I hoped it would be a pleasant family activity, correct? Okay? Again, incorrect. The first strange incident occurred when we were relaxing by the stunning infinity pool with a view of the sea. Simply as I'm about to jump in, Amy says, "Oh, can you stay out for a second?" I had been looking forward to simply floating around and relaxing for a while. We would want to take a photo of just girls, Mom, Sarah, and I alone. Okay, all right, whatever. I'm thinking, there is only one image. She won't even let me participate once they take that one, though. She essentially leads them from one picture opportunity to the next. All the while, I stood there observing them as if I were an outsider who happened to walk into their family portrait. They're posing and smiling as if I'm not there, and I'm just hanging about carrying their things. At least Sarah made an effort to engage me, while Amy was always making excuses. "Oh, let's just do one more without him for memories," she would say. Alternatively, "This is only for the gals." And she would give me this look as if she knew precisely what she was doing each time she got away with it. As the one who handled the camera and paid the bill, I began to feel like a prop. When I returned from my decision to go get a short drink at the bar later that afternoon, I saw that everyone else had taken this group selfie without me. They had already taken a picture and uploaded it before I had been gone for more than 5 minutes. It was similar to all of the memories she was gathering while traveling. She made a special effort to ensure that I wasn't involved. I stopped following her on social media by the time we had dinner that evening because, to be honest, I found it aggravating that she kept deleting me from everything. Right now, I was hoping that we would really get to eat supper together. Earlier, Sarah and I even made a joke about how we would make sure to sit together this time. No matter what. Naturally, though, Amy makes a rapid move when we get at the table, sliding into the seat next to Sarah. She then demands that her parents take the chairs across so that everyone can enjoy the view. Can you guess where I ended up? Yes. Squeezed between her parents and the kitchen door, I was at the edge with my back to the view. It's difficult to describe, but it seemed like every time I attempted to interrupt, Amy would somehow bring up a topic from their past, such as a strange anecdote from Sarah's high school years or a family outing to the lake. Things that clearly didn't involve me, you know. Additionally, Amy would ram through any attempts by Sarah or her parents to involve me or provide context, changing the topic of conversation. By dessert, all I was doing was sitting there eating in silence while others spoke and laughed all around me. Things only got worse the next day. To do some sightseeing, we made the decision to reserve a boat cruise. It felt quite claustrophobic because it was a small boat with only 5 seats. I proposed that perhaps we could divide up, with Amy sitting alone while Sarah's parents sat together. Naturally, though, Amy had another idea. "Oh, it will be more balanced if you sit on the other row," she says. While she got to sit with Sarah and their parents, Translation sat by herself. And so, there I was, once again cut off from them. And to further improve the situation, they purchased one of the souvenir shots that the tour leader was taking for all of the passengers. Additionally, I can be seen sitting off to the side of the picture as the family gathers as a joyful small group. I had the impression that I was simply accompanying someone else's family. Come on, I tried to ignore it and not let it affect me. I was beginning to feel less like Sarah's spouse and more like a stranger by the time we returned to the hotel. And, to be honest, I didn't understand Amy's behavior. Why would she invite me to join her on this trip that I had organized and paid for if she didn't want me there? Then there was another incident during supper. We visited a well-known seafood restaurant in Cabo, the kind where bookings must be made weeks in advance. I had done that. I had reserved the nicest table, complete with a view of the sunset. However, Amy almost dashes to get the finest seat when we arrive, leaving me on the edge once more. I attempted to say something about it since I'd had enough this time. Amy exits, but Sarah even supported me by claiming she wanted to sit with me. "Quit being so needy. Our family is here for a vacation." The nerve? I felt like the guy who stepped in to take the photos and pay the bill by the end of that meal. Not much more. Sarah was obviously frustrated as well. However, she insisted that perhaps Amy was merely seeking family recollections, I wasn't sure how much more I could handle at this point. Okay. I was barely hanging on by the third day. Every single thing Amy did, I'm telling you, seemed to be done with the express purpose of making me feel alienated during this trip. Sarah was still engrossed in that when I tried to discuss it with her. Perhaps Amy is just trying to create memories with her family. I understand, but I can only take so much. Particularly when it seemed like Amy was making a special effort to exclude me from everything. Next, we arrive at the spa day that we had scheduled. Now I had spent months organizing this entire situation. I had a private suite with Sarah. Even though her parents had theirs, I had reserved a room for Amy alone. Sincerely, I reasoned that everyone could benefit from some downtime. Surprise, surprise. Amy had other ideas. Thus, we are all prepared to leave. Then Sarah's father says he doesn't feel well enough to go to the spa. All he wanted to do was sit and unwind by the shore. All right, not a huge deal. I reasoned that her mother could have her own suite, and Sarah and I could still have our spa day. Amy suddenly decides she wants to make it a girls' day, though. She pulls Sarah aside and says, "Hey, wouldn't it be great if it was just us girls, you and me and Mom?" And then she actually has the nerve to look at me and go, "You could stay back and keep Dad company." He'd probably enjoy it. At this point, I was just staring at her thinking, is this woman serious? She actually expected me to skip out on the spa day that I booked and paid for, so she could have a little girls' bonding time. What's the worst? Sarah didn't want to make a fuss, so she just went along with it. I was fuming, but managed to keep it in. Fine, I thought. If that's what they want, I'll sit this one out. I ended up hanging out with Sarah's dad, which was honestly the best part of the trip so far. We had a good chat, and he gave me some nice advice about life. Shared a few stories about his younger days, and it helped calm me down a bit. But while I'm sitting there, I can't help but stew over the whole situation. I kept thinking about how Amy was treating me like an extra in my own life, and all the little digs and exclusions were just building up in my mind. I realized I'd been bending over backwards to make this trip perfect for everyone. And here I was, being told to sit this one out by the very person I was trying to include. That night, after Sarah's dad went to his room to rest, I sat down with Sarah and tried to explain just how much it was getting to me. I told her that Amy was crossing lines that didn't make sense, and that if it continued, I didn't know how much longer I could just sit there and take it. I could see she was torn. On one hand, she got that I was hurt, but on the other, she still thought maybe Amy wasn't doing it on purpose. She probably just wants some family time. She kept saying, "But I wasn't buying it. You don't accidentally exclude someone like that over and over." So I made up my mind right then and there. I was done playing the nice guy. If Amy wanted to act like I didn't exist on this trip, then fine. I'd start treating her like a guest who just happened to be along for the ride. I wasn't going to go out of my way to make her life difficult, but I also wasn't about to keep covering for her or playing into her little family vacation fantasy. The notion hit me the next morning. See, I'd paid for the full trip up front, rooms, flights, spa treatments, the works. But thankfully, the hotel had a policy where room rates for things like meals, beverages, and activities could be invoiced separately. I'd been covering everything, including all the small extras Amy had been purchasing. And trust me, she'd been building it up. Room service, additional beverages by the pool, some special dessert requests, you name it. So I walked down to the hotel lobby and chat to the front desk manager, asking whether they can split the bill per room. They didn't ask any questions. I merely told them it was for spending monitoring, and they were pleased to cooperate. I had them transmit all the charges for Amy's room directly to her. I wasn't going to create a disturbance, but this was my way of saying, "You want to treat me like an outsider? Cool. Now you can control your own finances." I didn't inform Sarah about the idea, assuming I'd let things evolve on their own. Part of me felt a little guilty because, okay, it was a bit of a petty move. But at the same time, I felt that Amy needed a reality check. She had been behaving as though I was only a spectator and that this was her trip and little family get-together. She could now pay for herself and act like a responsible adult. As we prepared for the tasks of the day, I experienced a strange feeling of tranquility. For the first time on this journey, I wasn't anxious about being ignored or marginalized. I knew what I was going to do, and that Amy would be surprised when it came time to check out in a few days. I reasoned that I would wait for everything to happen and not get involved until it was absolutely required. In my heart, though, I was eager to witness her reaction when she realized that this small family getaway wouldn't be an all-expense-paid trip after all. Okay, so by the time the final day of the trip arrives, I'm getting tired of Amy's shenanigans. I had remained composed, played nice, snapped all the photos, and let her take charge while I sat back and said nothing. But I knew it was time for my plan to start working that morning. I was prepared for the confrontation at the front desk when it was time for us to check out of the hotel. I had previously made arrangements with the hotel to ensure that they were prepared to divide the expenses when we left. I made sure Sarah's and her parents' rooms were covered so everything would go well. However, Amy had been accruing a lot of rooms, service orders, spa treatments, and poolside snacks. On her tab, those were supposed to be waiting. Since I had some things to settle at the front desk, I casually told Sarah that she and her parents may go ahead to the airport, and I would handle things with Amy. She was rather perplexed, but I had finished my explanation by then. She didn't resist when I informed her that it would be simpler if they left first. I go to the front desk to settle the bills after they've departed. Amy walks down with her luggage in hand as I'm finishing up, presumably thinking I'll be there to drop her off at the airport without any problems. She receives the bill from the front desk manager. You should have seen her face, dude. The realization, the bewilderment, the shocked expression. It came to her in waves. After taking a quick look at the paper, she looks up at me in confusion. You're not covering this, are you? Her voice nearly drips with incredulity as she asks. I simply looked at her calmly and responded, Oh, I've paid for my family's expenses. For yours, you're good. She's still standing there, gazing at the bill as if it were her first time seeing numbers. Well, I didn't know we were splitting things like this, she replies, trying to shrug it off. I maintain my composure and inform her that considering her recent behavior, I felt it was only fair. At that point, fear begins to set in. Since she hadn't exactly planned on spending money on a Cabo all-inclusive vacation, I suppose. In an attempt to appear composed and as like she has things under control, she takes out her credit card and gives it to the man at the front desk, but it is refused. Her expression changed from mild concern to outright terror. She begins frantically trying to think of what to do, checking her phone and talking about her bank, perhaps hoping it's a mistake. I'm waiting for the entire situation to unfold while standing off to the side and idly checking my watch. Her eyes are now virtually pleading with me in the hopes that I will intervene and save her. To be honest, though, I didn't feel guilty at all. I had been treated like an outsider on this trip, and now she was having to cope with the fallout. It wasn't as if I had suddenly flung this bill at her. She hadn't given any of this any thought before placing her orders, and now it was her responsibility if she was unable to pay her own bills. Even from a few feet away, you could hear the annoyance on the other line when she finally phones her husband. The idea of sending money to save her didn't excite him. And I can't hold the man responsible. It was a large bill. To put it mildly, her room service binges and spa treatments had quickly mounted up. She eventually had the money moved after much back and forth, but not before the hotel staff and a few other visitors saw her small situation and watched her handle it. It was the trip's icing on the cake. People in the lobby gave her some unfriendly stares, and I simply sat back and took in the situation in silence. If she came over and truly apologized, I was nearly willing to step in and cover the cost. However, there was not a single apology or recognition of her treatment of me. Thus, she pays the bill at last, and I believed that to be the conclusion. This is where things get even better, though. I also hadn't checked her in for her flight. She discovers she hasn't checked in when we get at the airport and has to deal with the last-minute inconvenience. Sarah had to wait in line, appearing agitated and hurried, while Sarah and I were ready and headed right to the gate, coping with the tension of the final minute. I had also upgraded our tickets to business class on the return trip, as if that wasn't enough. Amy was forced to take a middle seat in economy, while Sarah and I snuggled into our large, comfortable seats that were extended by our additional legroom when we boarded the aircraft. It felt fantastic to finally have some retribution after everything she had done, even though I realized this seems trivial. She shot me as she passed us. She seemed shocked that I had left her, but I just returned to my seat with a grin. The finest aspect. At last, Sarah was on my side, after witnessing the entire hotel and airport situation with the bill. She understood chaos. She'd seen what I had endured over the whole journey. Sarah was aware of the reality, even though Amy attempted to portray me as the bad guy in this situation. Amy was still in a rage when we touched down. She started talking about how I had embarrassed her, left her stranded with a hefty cost, and failed to assist her at the airport as soon as she saw her parents. In front of everyone, she caused such a commotion that her dad became anxious, and even her mother took notice. However, her mother silenced her, claiming to have seen Amy's treatment of me and excluding me from everything. Amy was taken aback because it was likely the first time she had ever been called out. Ultimately, her father just asked me to go, and we dropped Amy off at the airport where she was still upset and navigating her own way home. I assumed that the turmoil of the Cabo vacation would cease once we returned home. Amy received a fairly obvious message, isn't that right? I was treated like an outsider by her. We would all go on once I forced her to pay her own tab, or so I believed. As it happens, Amy wasn't going to take it lying down. Amy calls Sarah's parents as soon as we get back, claiming as though I've somehow offended them by telling them how terrible I was and how I left her stranded with a hefty bill. She must have made it a point to leave me out of almost everything, or conveniently omitted all the instances in which she disregarded me. Even her parents, however, supported me. They had witnessed her treatment of me. Amy's mother actually warned her to stop whining when she began her little pity party. Amy wasn't finished, though. She told her spouse the entire thing, accusing me of being a huge, terrible person who humiliated her, and of using money to dominate her. Her husband isn't perfect, but it seems like he wasn't too happy about helping her out either. Because of all this turmoil, the guy didn't even come to Thanksgiving, claiming he didn't want to sit at the same table as me. In Sarah's family, Thanksgiving is usually a huge occasion, but this year it's more so because everyone is worried about her dad's health. It was crucial for Sarah's mother to have the family there since she truly wanted everyone to be together. However, due of me, Amy and her spouse did not go. I was on the verge of skipping it myself in order to prevent any further problems. However, I was personally invited by Sarah's father. I decided to keep things low-key and cordial, but I wasn't going to turn him down, so I showed up. Everything appeared to be okay when I arrived. Sarah's mother didn't draw me aside until later in the evening to tell me the truth about what had been happening. Amy's husband apparently had enough of her drama. He began to put his foot down because, as he described it, he had had enough of the holiday from hell. Amy had been putting increasing pressure on him to take on a second job in order to maintain the lifestyle she believed she was entitled to. He informed Sarah's mother when she tried Cabo that he wouldn't be taking on all the housework if he was going to put in more hours. Naturally, Amy was not at all fond of that concept. According to her mother, she had even threatened to leave him if he didn't start giving her more since things had grown so horrible. According to Sarah's mother, she once warned Amy that she would be financially independent if she ever followed through with a divorce, as they would no longer support her. To be honest, I felt a little better about things after hearing that. I had finally had enough of her entitled demeanor, and it seemed like I wasn't the only one. The actual Thanksgiving meal was flawless, mostly due to the absence of Amy and her spouse. Sarah and I finally got some serenity without all the commotion on the sidelines, and her parents appeared at ease. Her father even made a moment to express his gratitude to me for all of my assistance during the trip. The entire turmoil was nearly worth it for that little moment. Sarah's mom. And I sat down with Sarah after supper, after her dad had gone to bed, and the topic of Cabo came up again. In retrospect, Sarah acknowledged that perhaps allowing Amy to accompany her wasn't the greatest course of action, particularly considering the outcome. Sarah's mother comforted her by explaining that she had no clue Amy would act in such a manner, but I could see she felt a bit bad for not intervening sooner. Sarah's mother then gave her another small surprise. While her husband works full-time and beyond, Amy has apparently been working a part-time job, hardly putting in 20 hours a week. She needs time for herself and has been assuming he will handle everything while she relaxes. Before the vacation, her husband was already on the verge of losing it, and Cabo had just made it worse. It explained a lot of her entitlement, but I had no idea she was living that way. Ultimately, Sarah's parents were completely on my side. Her mother even stated that they believed I had done the right thing by requiring her to pay for herself after seeing everything come to pass. After the excursion, Sarah's father apparently drew Sarah's mother aside and informed her that he had had enough of Amy's conduct and had witnessed how she was treating me. To be honest, I was a little relieved to hear that. Knowing that I wasn't the only one who felt Amy had overreached herself was comforting. Following Thanksgiving, everything began to settle down once more. However, occasionally, Amy would text Sarah in an attempt to play the victim or make a crude remark about how I used money to make her feel inferior. I never answered. She finally stopped. However, we sometimes heard from Sarah's mother that Amy was still coping with the consequences of the trip. It seemed like her spouse was adamant about paying her back and had intensified his efforts. I suppose Amy wasn't prepared for the wake-up call that Cabo offered her. It quote, "S difficult to return to a 5-star resort after you've experienced it." Sarah's mother even joked with me afterwards. And for Amy, it appeared to be the case. Without really earning anything, she believed she earned it after catching a peek of the good life. And now, well, she was experiencing the pain of what she had done. Do I regret giving her the bill in retrospect? No way. She needed the lesson, even if it might have been difficult. She probably thought that I would simply roll over if she treated me whatever she pleased. However, if someone treats me like an afterthought, I won't be funding them. On a vacation I organized, that's all. Then everyone should become closer on family trips, right? I suppose that wasn't our destiny. However, I don't mind at all. Sarah is too. If anything, the journey revealed Amy's true nature to us. Additionally, it could have served as a small reality check for her.